Well, with that, Eric Fawcett's waiting. I do want to give a quick rundown. The Gators obviously do advance to the Final Four in San Antonio with an 87-71 win over Maryland on Thursday. Tight game at the end of the first half. Gators dominate Maryland throughout the game, out rebounding them 42-20, and ultimately secure that victory, where they went on to play Texas Tech, who again trailing 75-66 with less than 3 minutes left in the game. 18-4 run to end it. Walter Clayton scored 13 of his 30 points in the final few minutes of the game. Thomas Haugh got 20 points and 11 rebounds in an 84-79 victory. And with that, wearing some vintage Stadium and Gale merchandise, we welcome from the Florida basketball Eric Fawcett.
Let's go.
Drip on.
Yeah, I was close to putting a little sticker over and getting Jordan and Nick over top. Ran out of time a little bit, but hopefully you can at least appreciate the retro stuff. And again, I know you took a long way to travel to get to me, so have to represent whenever I can.
Already.
All right, Eric, let's get into it. Gators back in their first Final Four in 17 years now. Give us the high level, man. 2 victories. The first one probably a little messy and a little closer than maybe Gator fans want, and obviously end up with a big victory. And then 3 minutes left in the game Saturday night. I think a lot of Gator fans had kind of assumed that this was going to be the end of their road. They fight back. Give us kind of the high level of this past week.
I mean, man, if you believe in destiny, if you believe in charmed teams or teams of destiny, I think you might look at those final minutes against Texas Tech and just say, how did the Gators possibly pull that one out? It was one of those things where you could have a discussion of, did the Gators claw their way back and steal that game, or did Texas Tech choke it away? And it really took both. This is not one of those things where you make 1 or 2 shots. For 2 good free throw shooters on Texas Tech to miss the front ends of 1-and-1s and give up a whole bunch of points, that's just, you could do that 99 times and they at least hit 1 or 2 of those, and that makes the game very different. Or, in the building that Steph Curry built for Walter Clayton to channel him and hit some of those shots, sprinting from the paint back to the 3-point line and pivoting on one foot and putting it up. There's just so much that needed to go right for the Gators and so much that needed to go wrong for Texas Tech, who's an awesome, fantastic team that played a great game. And it's just one of those things that I think if you even look back at pretty much every champion, even these UConn teams that just won back-to-back and really kind of dominated both seasons, they still had one moment per year where it looked like there was no chance that they could win. And it just seems like every team that wins a championship has one of those moments. And man, if we are looking back on this in a couple of weeks, that's certainly Florida's. So yeah, anyone who's into the storybook nature of sports and college sports and a tournament run, I think maybe you look at that moment and you say, yeah, this Florida team might just be charmed.
Eric, I want you to talk nerdy to us for a second. There was, I can't remember the time, but there's probably like 5 minutes left or right before that run. And Todd elects like, hey, let's go 2 fouls to get them into the bonus. I think they had fouls to give. You probably don't want to foul Williams. Is that his name? I'm messing his name up. Probably don't want to foul Williams. You're shooting like 84.6% free throw shooter. You probably fouled the wrong guy there. But you get away with it. Misses the first end. Texas Tech misses 2 front ends. Florida goes 3-3-3-3-3. What is the nerdy analytic reason for fouling intentionally there?
So I would really push back. And I know it's being spun that way because Florida won. And when you win, suddenly you can start to say, oh, like meant to be like, you do not foul an 84% free throw shooter in the 1-and-1. There's no analytically sound. So anyways, for those of you who might be NBA fans who don't know what the 1-and-1 is, because of the 2 halves in college basketball, when you hit 7 fouls, it's called a 1-and-1 situation. So if you make that first free throw, you get to shoot a second. But if you miss that first one, the ball's live. So there is and Florida has used this in the past. Todd Golden has really used the 1-on-1, and analytical coaches can. If you send someone who's a 60% free throw shooter to the line, it's not a situation where they shoot 2 shots at 60% and maybe make one of them. If they miss that first one, then they get nothing. There is not a good analytical argument to foul a 84% free throw shooter. So I still think it's, a little bit ambiguous whether Florida did it. And that's part of the reason we can sit here and laugh about it and say, like, man, this Florida team might just be a team of destiny, because and that's why I said you run that back 99 or 100 times, and you'd think that Williams is going to knock down that first half of the 1-on-1, or then again, like Toppin on the second one, who's a 70% free throw shooter. Again, not great, but still that's over the threshold. But hypothetically, when you're down by 9, like you were saying, you're down whatever they were, 10, it's with a couple of minutes left, and you go into desperation mode, you kind of also need to make moves that aren't necessarily the right thing to do in every situation. I mean, sometimes you put it all on black, and you let the ball spin, and you see what happens. And again, so I would not say it is a viable strategy entering this Final Four game if Florida finds themselves in the same situation to foul an 84% free throw shooter. But if it's 64, sure, that would be great. But it has been fun to see the reaction. And again, there's been lots of benefits to the math ball style, but I'll have to say this is not one that I think you take and say, oh, this works. You should be fouling 84% free throw shooters in the 1-on-1. You should not be. But again, one of the things that does at least just, it's a chip in a chair. You do, even though that guy's a good free throw shooter, you just open yourself up to the chance that they have an empty possession and you go hit a 3 on the other end. And that was a massive swing and one of the reasons Florida won.
Eric,
sound like a
what do you think about Haugh? Right, I think he comes off the bench. He does give you starter minutes, right? He gives you a lot of he gets the time of a starter, but I do think sometimes we start flat. And my argument and my take has been versus a team like Duke, I don't think we're going to be afforded a slow start. Even the second half, I thought, even if he didn't start the last game, coming out after halftime, I thought he should have started because we just needed that energy. On the defensive end, loose balls, he just provides a different type of energy to the team. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's an awesome observation. And I kind of, shot down Nick's advances at talking nerdy to him, but I can do that now actually, because there are lineup data and numbers that talk about which combinations of players play the best together. And Florida's starting 5 is one of the worst starting 5s that they could put out, or the worst combination of 5 players. With Ruben Chinyelu on the floor, the team performs worse than they do with him on the bench. And that's just that is fact. There are numbers to back that up. Now, this is also the same as last year when they started Micah Hanlockton, and the numbers suggested Alex Condon and Thomas Haugh were the best combination of frontcourt players that should be on the floor together. So my answer to you is, like, Florida has played the same starters every single game this season outside of injury. And last year they played the same starters every single game of every season except for injury. So I'm not anticipating any changes, but I also agree with you. I definitely think Haugh should start. And I can tell you unquestionably the team is at their best when it's Alex Condon and Thomas Haugh in the front court. There's no ambiguity. And I do think I think he played only 11, or Chinyelu only played 11 minutes against Texas Tech. And he had some rough moments. And there was just a couple times where he unfortunately missed a layup where it didn't catch rim and turned the ball over after he had a post up, and Golden just couldn't get him off the floor quick enough. And, and again, that was the risk you took when you took a player who was really Washington State's 4th big man in their rotation. And this actually happened to him last year, where he couldn't play in the NCAA tournament for Washington State. He only got in for a couple of minutes. So things have been a little tough for him, but again, physicality, athleticism, effort, there's a lot there that's good with Chinyelu, but it does seem once the basketball gets to a little bit of a higher level, he struggles. And I think Haugh is spectacular. I think he was Florida's best player against Texas Tech, which is crazy to say given that Walter Clayton had the nuclear couple of minutes to win the game for the Gators. But Walter Clayton wasn't great in the first half, and Thomas Haugh was on both ends.
He was intertwined in that 2 minutes as well. Like, he was intertwined in that whole. Yeah, he had 2 big shots, man, down the stretch there for sure.
Yeah, so for him, I mean, he's one of the most important defensive players, and he got really targeted by Williams, someone who's a really big post-up player, and he got Haugh a couple times, but Haugh got him a few times too, and that was the biggest defensive assignment, and Haugh did awesome. And then on the offensive end, his ability, he had some of those blow-by layups because he's 6'9" with these massive strides, and he's one dribble and 3 steps from a layup. So I thought his game was absolutely spectacular. I thought he was truly Florida's best player. So while I agree with you that Florida's best 5 is Haugh on the floor in place of Chinyelu, I wouldn't anticipate a change just because that's not what Florida does. But I will say this, and I know we're starting to talk hypothetical matchups. You mentioned Duke. I mean, man, you need someone to guard Cooper Flagg at the 4, and I don't think that's going to be if Florida starts the same way, and it's
Haugh.
Cooper Flagg at the 4, and it's that matchup prototypically with how Florida starts, that would be Alex Condon on a bad ankle. That's scary. So I would, that would be very interesting. Would the Gators change their starting lineup after 30 whatever games? It's hard to imagine, but that you could just see that the quick pull and get Haugh in there. And yeah, he's got to be an upwards of 30-minute guy. No question.
Yeah, I was just looking. We had Evan Mayakawa on the show a few, I guess maybe 6 weeks ago now, and he does a lot of advanced analytics. And the only player that's listed in their best for Florida, the best 2-man, 3-man, 4-man, and 5-man lineups for the Florida Gators is, you guys have a guess?
Active participants here. But like I said, all the numbers pointed to the same way. Oh yeah, I thought you said you guys. I was over.
Well, I thought you were doing Eric. We were all on the show. Yeah, we were all on the show.
On the best 2, 3, 4, and 5-man rosters that the Gators could potentially put together, Thomas Haugh is the only one listed on all 4 of those lineups.
Yeah, and we're at the point where again, that's why I'm glad you looked up those numbers, because it doesn't take, you don't need to get too cute with it. Anything that evaluates player plus minus lineup data, 5-man, which is the best in my opinion. We're at the end of the season, all kinds of sample size. And again, it's not even just this year. You can even go back to last year when Florida was starting Micah Handlocked in, and the numbers were the same thing. When Haugh is on the floor with Condon, things are at their best. Of course, they also had Tyree Samuel at the time, which was in there as well. But yeah, and which again just speaks to how incredible Haugh's career has just been in 2 years, as someone who wasn't a particularly heralded recruit, and he's someone who was just Florida's best player in an Elite 8 game, and someone that Silk's already looking forward to a national championship game, and said like, hey, we need Haugh in the starting lineup and playing an important role.
I did see a mock draft with him today at number 34.
Bleacher Report, yeah.
Yeah, that tournament bump is real for sure, but he's got the length, he's got the versatility. It's talking about next year's roster when the Gators are in a Final Four does seem just a little crazy to me. I know people on Twitter and some of the message boards want to already start talking portal and who's returning, whatever. I'm like, man, let's focus on this Final Four and let the figure things out later. But certainly interesting to see him and entering that high second round in mock drafts. And I think it just, again, speaks to the eyeballs that are now on this Florida team.
It's interesting because I was talking to your podcast host, and he said he had talked to a scout in the NBA, and they think that his ball handling, he can play as a big guard at the next level. Obviously playing as a 4 here at Florida, but I think that kind of versatility, if he's viewed like that, to steal a line from Tim Tebow, I don't need all 32 teams to like me. I just need one. If there's one team in the NBA that thinks, hey, he could play a small 4, or he could be a big guard for us too. So that'll be interesting. But if you're enjoying this basketball run, there will be a lot of turnover in the offseason. Donate to Florida Victorious as we look to fund the 25-26 Florida Gators basketball team. Eric, when I watched this team, it was interesting to me, and we had Neil on, and I mentioned, hey, I don't think Florida, uses that many players, and then the injuries started, and you started to get a ton of minutes and starts for Denzel Aberdeen. Urban started playing more. You started getting more, these guys more minutes, but you're not really seeing that now. Maybe Denzel. Do you think Denzel or Florida is better for having gone through those injuries and getting more guys minutes now?
I've really always been someone who said that I think that depth is underrated in the regular season and overrated in the postseason. And it is one of those things that, hey, we'll see if there needs to be a moment for in Aberdeen coming off the bench and doing something big, or a Klavzar to come in and knock down some shots. But I mean, I feel like ultimately it comes down to your best 6 or maybe 7 guys. And, respectfully to those guys who I think are good players that you're talking about, if we're at a situation where Aberdeen is really pushed into service and needs to have a big game, or if Klavzar needs to have a big game for the Gators, like something has went fairly wrong. And I'm not sure at this point of the tournament, that would bode well. Maybe that's something that, earlier in the tournament, you look for some big moments there. But at this point, I think like this is high level basketball. This is one of the best Final Fours college basketball has ever seen. And there's a number of ways to talk about that. Like these are going to be 2 incredible games for whoever goes on to win the championship. And I think your Florida is going to win or lose this with their 5 starters plus Thomas Haugh, in my opinion. But hey, well, you'll see if you'll see if I'm wrong, but I think those are the guys you look to. And it's great that depth was really able to help Florida in the regular season. And the fact that the guards you mentioned were able to step up when Martin and Clayton were injured. But man, you need your best to be your best right now, and maybe less depth.
We look forward to having you on next Monday, right before actually it'll be national championship. So you have to push Tuesday.
I was actually going to ask you guys
pop up show
your,
this weekend. We'll do a pop up show this weekend after Denzel goes for 30 against Auburn.
That's it. That was a programming note. I was going to have to ask you guys about it, because if the Gators are in the national championship game, it'll be right during your normal recording time on Monday. So I was going to see what you guys what your plans might be if the Gators are in that one.
How mad would TNT get if I was like live streaming from courtside press row? Just like turn the camera around, like, hey, by the way, you can just watch the game from courtside here. I think I'm going to see it be taken away pretty quickly. Yeah.
Those Delatory Plus memes from several years ago would be back.
Yeah, they're back.
Wow. I forgot about Delatory Plus.
Yeah. Shout out to Chris Zen for making that little Delatory Plus.
I put on the old Stadium and Gale shirt, and suddenly all the old references are back.
That's right.
What
nostalgic.
I think there's a lot to what you say. Like when you get to the postseason, I talk about in baseball a lot. People are like, why is this guy still hitting him? Like it's the NCAA tournament. You're going with your 9 guys. The season Walt has had, when did you or maybe anybody know that, hey, he can have this kind of shot? Like you said, he channeled Steph Curry in the building that Steph built. I think some of those shots that he made, and 2, looking at towards the end, it was almost like, hey, our offense is going to be Walt, run around until you feel like shooting it, and we'll hand you the ball, we'll pass you the ball, we'll run an off-ball screen, we'll do a handoff screen, just whenever you feel like pulling up, pull up.
Yeah, so I think for me, something that was almost a little lost just because it was a bitter game when the Gators lost to Colorado in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year. And the final score is 102-100 for Colorado. But it was really a game that Colorado was absolutely controlling by multiple possessions. And Walter Clayton went absolutely insane in the last couple of minutes to just give the Gators a chance. And it was one of those things that if Florida was able to pull out that game, Walter Clayton is already a March hero. So I already look back to like that game and his heroics there. And he has some of those big March moments. And then when you look at this year, because Florida played a pretty soft non-conference schedule, they just didn't really have any of those moments in November and December that really suggested that that really just gave him an opportunity to take over. Like Florida just didn't play close games. But the first one that really came was in the SEC opener against Kentucky. And again, the Gators ultimately lost that one. And it was another game where it could have gotten ugly, but Walter Clayton, 33 points, started going crazy in the last few minutes and putting the team on his shoulders and pulling up. And again, it shows just how there's a lot of styles of player that can have success in basketball. But when you have someone that can shoot off the dribble from range, you're always going to have moments like this. And again, there is some I don't want to say holes to Walter Clayton's offensive game, but he's not someone who's going to cross you up, take it into the paint, take contact and finish for an and one. Not really as much his game. And there's a lot of advantages to having downhill guards like that. But even a player who does that, they're not going to bring you back when you're down 10 to Colorado or when you're down 10 to Texas Tech and bring you back in. Like you need these kinds of shots. And that's why even in college basketball circles, there's a lot of people that talk about who's going to be this year's Kemba candidate. For those of you who might remember Kemba Walker with a legendary crossover, broke a guy's ankles, hit a huge shot. Like cardiac Kemba made it happen. And now everyone always talks about who's going to be this year's Kemba candidate. And I think that it's not even so much like who's going to be the hero, but who has that ability to cross someone up and hit a shot from range. Like that is I feel like a style you need in March when the game is going to get cranked up from a physicality and defensive intensity standpoint. Good luck getting to the rim and finishing, and good luck getting a call because the ref is swallowing his whistle in that moment. So the guys that really rely on that style of play, it's going to be harder for them to operate versus if you can hit on a step back from 30 feet, that's always going to be there for you. And and that is something where I think I even wrote at Gator Country 6 weeks ago or something, mentioning that I was like, Florida has the perfect guard for March, and we saw it against Texas Tech.
Eric,
What is it?
go
ahead.
Do you think Condon's he's just not playing? Do you think it's just the ankle, or is it a little bit of confidence as well? Like, what do you think his struggles are right now?
I think it's got to be the ankle. Just because I look at his game both this year and last year, and one of the things about him is it has been consistency. He is someone who's not a boomer bust guy. He's just rock solid from a defensive standpoint, rock solid with the way he runs in transition and gets under the rim and finishes strong. And it's pretty easy to see the lack of confidence he seems to have the moment he gets airborne or the moment he gets the ball near the rim and doesn't really want to elevate in traffic. It's playing body language doctor a little bit, but just given his track record in college where he has been very consistent. And again, looking at the film where as soon as he starts pivoting, especially on that ankle, it's looking pretty tender and looks like he's not confident making the same kind of cuts, leaping in traffic. So for someone who has been really Florida's second best player on a lot of nights this season, that is something that I do think is going to be somewhat of a concern, particularly against an Auburn team that is built kind of like Florida, just in the front court more in the sense that they play a lot of size and really play through the interior. This is going to be a game where his particularly defense is going to be challenged. And you hope here that this week off is really big. And again, I forget if we talked about it on the podcast, but of course I don't need to tell the story. Everyone's heard it a million times at this point. He was Australian rules football player who transitioned to basketball fairly late, but I think it was kind of, which again, it's a story that's been played out so much, but when he rolled his ankle for the first time, he mentioned he had never rolled his ankle before in his life. And I was like, if there's something that truly confirms this guy has just only recently started playing basketball, that was it right there. The fact that a guy could be 20 years old rolling his ankle for the first time in his life. But at the same time, I heard that story. And I mean, I laugh at it for the reason I just mentioned to you, but also I'm like, oh, he's only rolled his ankle once. This is not a familiar feeling to him. And it seems like he is the way that he doesn't yet trust it is maybe of someone who has never experienced this before. And I totally understand it for someone whose game is so much running in transition and finishing in traffic. Yeah. Having a tender ankle is not a good feeling.
Buddy, I was a menace on the 8-foot rims in middle school. An absolute menace. You're going to roll your ankle when you're playing above the rim, like I did at the mean streets of St. Gregory. Great Catholic school.
About, man.
I see a lot of familiarity between Nick's game and Alex Condon's game. I want to ask you a quick question.
Basically the same people.
No, no doubt. I believe you 100%.
G'day.
I want to ask you, we were talking a little bit about defense and defensive efficiency. We didn't see much of Urban Klavjar. I don't want to call him Urban because that's how you say it. We didn't see much of him. We didn't see him against Texas Tech. Kind of talked a little bit about it when I was watching the game Thursday. Kind of time to shrink the roster a little bit as you get to these final games. Is it just the defensive part of his game, or is it just, hey, the Gators have to go with who they know the most right now and just rely on those guys?
Yeah, the thing with Klobzar is he's someone who's, of course, undersized, and he's someone that in his whole career has been a primary ball handler, someone who has the rock a ton, is playing out of ball screens, is finding teammates coming off pins. So the problem with that from a bench player standpoint is like, what's he going to do coming into the game? If you play that style and take the ball out of Walter Clayton's hands? No.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to take the ball out of Condon's hands? No. Are you going to take the ball out of Haugh? So it's hard for that player archetype that is a true point guard, a ball dominant guy, to come in on a team that starts Will Richard, Elijah Martin, and Walter Clayton. So that's one thing where I just don't feel the fit is great. And that's where Aberdeen has been someone who at least can come in and guard multiple positions. And that's how he's kind of worked as a complementary player, can knock down shots off the catch. And so I do think offensively the fit is pretty clunky for Klobzar, unfortunately. And even when he has been out there next to Walter Clayton, it's not the best way to get the best out of Klobzar, who's at his best when he's running a bunch of ball screens, which Florida is not going to be like, our eighth guy's in the game, let's start focusing our offense around him. It's just not how it works when you have Walter Clayton on the team. And then, of course, the other side of it is like, well, if he's not going to be a super offensive weapon, well, he is going to be somewhat of a liability on the other end because he's not athletic, he's not quick, and he's 5'11". So it's something that I never felt totally like the fit was great, and I do think he's a better player than he has shown. But when you look at Florida's rotation, there's just not a particular spot you feel great for him in, and it does kind of make sense for Aberdeen to be your one guard off the bench, which is all Florida really needs. If you've got your three starters on the perimeter that are all going to play 30 plus minutes. It makes sense for Aberdeen to be out there, a guard with a little bit more length. And it's tough for Klobzar, but that's again, probably going down the conversation, what Florida's roster will look like next year, where they will certainly need some guard replacements. But right now I don't see him factoring in, but he's also, if something does happen, which again, I told Nick earlier, I was like, if we're talking about Aberdeen and Klobzar performances against Auburn, it probably means the game didn't go super well. But again, I know I mentioned on the last show, Klobzar is someone who has a ton of professional experience in a really good league in Spain. I mean, not a guy that's going to be rattled if he does get called upon. But I not anticipating him playing a big role here.
Eric, you are an adopted Gator fan. You picked us. What has this season been like? You've covered Florida for a long time. What has this season been like? And I think, I've told people this, you kind of lose your fandom when you're covering them and you're trying to be analytical and you're trying to be fair. But if you had a time this year, it's kind of just like, man, this is fun. I used to cover 4 losses in a month and 4 in a year.
Yeah, man, what a great question. I appreciate you asking, because this is my 7th year writing about the Gators, which is crazy. I mean, 7 years ago, Nick, we got on Skype at the time to talk with you and Andrew and Bernadette and the Gator Country crew to bring me on. And since then, as I'm sure everyone listening to this and you guys on the call, like, you're a very different person than you were 7 years ago. And your life has changed in a lot of ways from 7 years ago. And for me, as someone who came from Canada, or still in Canada, who loved basketball more than anything and was a high school basketball coach, I was like, well, I'm never going to really have a chance to coach at a particularly high level, but I could write. So I started writing about the team. And in the 7 years, particularly starting about 3 years ago, when I did get my opportunity to coach at a higher level, now I'm a professional basketball coach. And you know what, like that passion has really gone up for the coaching side. And that really fuels me. And while I love writing about basketball, I love having skin in the game. And I'll just be honest with you, the desire to write about a team that interest was really waning in, it went down a little bit, like let's be honest. So I think for it to have a season like this that really reminded me of why I wanted to start writing in the first place, not just to be connected to basketball in some ways, but I mean, like, man, I really do, like, I love sports just like we all do. And I still think so fondly upon when I was a kid, the people whose articles I would, Google to try to find my favorite writers who are writing about the Blue Jays and the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Gators on Bleacher Report back in the day, I think is what I always would try to just find some aggregated Florida content. And again, it's something that means so much to me that now I can be someone who really helps increase someone else's enjoyment of the team. And I do think that has been illuminated even more with basketball, where a lot of people in the Florida world that might be might be football fans first, that are now trying to get a deeper level of basketball analysis. And the fact that I can be that for people and bring them a kind of deeper enjoyment. And I think that that's just like the biggest compliment that I get from people is when they say your analysis has helped me enjoy Gators basketball more, or enjoy college basketball more, or even people that say, oh, I was watching the NBA and I saw something you guys talked about, and because I could recognize, oh, that's a Spain ball screen, I suddenly enjoyed it a lot more. Like, that does mean so much to me. So yeah, I'll be honest, I have been really like refreshed by this year in a way that I obviously wasn't expecting. It's writing and covering the team did become probably somewhat of a job at some point, but to have conversations like this and to have people that are genuinely super interested in basketball, and it's been awesome. It really has been a fun year, and this is something that I've been talking about with my wife, and no one's really asked me about it until now. So I appreciate the chance to air it out a bit.
Do those fans stop you in the bathroom stall? Actually,
no, it's just Dan. It's just Dan.
Eric, I know you got a lot of other things, so maybe you don't listen.
Hold on, Eric.
much.
PSA:
Yeah.
If anyone listening does see Dan out and about, wait to introduce yourself to him until you're both in the bathroom.
That's
Okay.
terrible advice, man.
Preferably at matching urinals.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times in the last few months, Eric, where people have come up to me and say that they're a big fan of the show. Why midstream? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, tap you on the shoulder. And
one was urinal to urinal, which like is what it is, right? Like that's where they're. The one guy that called out from like the number 2 stall to me, I'm like, all right, now we got to look at
big fan. Can you stop poo-pooing on our fans, please, while they're poo-pooing and saying hi to you?
Well, Eric, I want to, as we get you off the show, and we really appreciate you coming on tonight and talking to us. I think you're our most recurring guest that we've ever had, so we do appreciate that. To be able to watch your ascension over the last, 7 or so years, you were talking to us 6 years ago when the podcast started, about 6 years ago now, and it's been really cool to watch your career grow and blossom. And, if you're not listening to Eric and Neil's podcast, the Florida Basketball Hour, if you're not following Eric for some of the wonky basketball stuff, if that's the world that you're in, but if you ultimately just want a good guy and a good person, Eric is one of the best. So definitely encourage you to follow him and continue to root and cheer him on. He's my favorite Canadian.
Sub to the Patreon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. I know I joked about it the last time I was on, but I know you guys kind of like would have me on sometimes to kind of just check the box that you were
we had to
talking a little bit about basketball, and I understood that. And that was going to be the other answer to your question, Nick, about what it was like to cover some of those teams and versus this one. And again, as someone who just wants to see people engage with engage with sports in a way that makes their life better and brings them joy. I mean, it's been awesome to have a team that's not only winning but playing a style that people really like and is fun to watch and has a bunch of personalities that people love. So it has been good. And framing it in the way of like the 6 years of this show having me on. We've seen so much change.
There's been a lot of iterations. Look at your shirt.
There's been a lot of iterations, and of course, has been. I don't know if you guys thought you'd be doing it this long, but of course, for you guys to be kind of the preeminent Florida podcast in so many things, I think it's so cool to watch you guys and all that you've done as well.
Eric, before we leave, we did fail, and Rob mentioned it. Quick breakdown on Auburn. What can you tell us? We know Janai Broom suffered some sort of arm injury. Didn't really look like himself the second half after that injury. Gators obviously beat Auburn earlier in the season, a lot behind actually Urban Klavzar's 9 points that he got in that game. Break that game down for us just in a minute or two.
Yeah, that was crazy because Auburn was on I believe a 14-game winning streak. They were absolutely rolling everyone in college basketball. And for Florida to come in and win that game decisively was just an absolute, warning shot to everyone else in college basketball, what was coming from the Gators. And I think what shows that Florida truly did beat a really good team that it wasn't like Florida didn't expose Auburn as frauds. After Florida beat them, Auburn won their next 6 games in a row, blowing out some of the other top teams in the SEC. And in a year the SEC was stronger than it's ever been, Auburn locked up the number 1 seed with 2 games remaining. So again, I think that was crazy. Florida was getting everything offensively they wanted. Talked about that on my Patreon on a film study we do. But again, Haugh was amazing on the perimeter, driving guys down off the some of these bigger guys that are much more comfortable in the paint. That was a good matchup for the Gators. And then Auburn's season has been kind of weird because again, because they'd completely locked up the SEC, they didn't try at all in their last 2 regular season games, lost those. And then when they tried to flip the switch back in the SEC tournament, they didn't. They played really poorly. And suddenly you've got a team that was absolutely rolling everyone in college basketball, looking like one of the strongest teams college basketball has ever seen. And suddenly they're playing their worst basketball going into March. But it looks like they found it a little bit with what they did in their last game against Michigan State. Again, Janai Broom, one of the best players in the country, knocking down threes, as hard to stop as anyone in the country when he's got 2 feet in the paint. That's obviously going to be a huge challenge. But like you said, he took a crazy fall. He didn't practice today, but is supposed to be good to, well, he should play Saturday. No one said he was that good to go, but that could be the other maybe break that Florida gets if this is some kind of,
because there's a left arm injury, right?
Yeah. And it was,
and he's a left-handed.
If you watch the clip, you would be like, there's no way this guy's ever playing again. And then he got back on the court and hit a 3 right away. Yeah. So that'll be something to watch for sure. But I think Auburn is one of those teams that doesn't strike you with a ton of talent up and down. They really do play disciplined. They play with a great amount of structure, and their pieces fit really well. So it has been a really good story, in my opinion, because when you can have such a great season without having a ton of talent, but maybe that'll end here against the Gators, who've already beaten them once.
It was nice of Alex Condon to let Johnny Broom out of his pocket after that game and play the rest of the season.
Yeah, that was another storyline going for that one.
Eric, I got a question for you. I know in football, it's a little hard to kind of beat a team twice. What's your chances you think we got of actually getting these guys a second time around? Like you just mentioned.
We just saw it with Tennessee and Kentucky. Kentucky handled Tennessee twice, and now they had to play a third time, and Tennessee got smoked.
Right. That's why I feel like in basketball it's a little bit different sometimes. Maybe you can get the best of somebody a couple times, but I just want to know your take and your opinion on how good of a chance you think we had to actually beat these guys, considering they were supposed to hand us an L earlier in the year and we ended up giving them an L. So, they're kind of on their revenge kind of tip and want to get the best of us. So I just want to know your take on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that just kind of strikes me is just a reminder of how long the season is and how long ago February 8 felt like when that game was. So there is so much time that has passed, and it does feel like both teams are playing different. I mean, Thomas Haugh did play a great game then, but I don't think anyone was looking at Haugh as one of Florida's best players. Now he's emerged as someone who's as important as ever. And again, I do feel like Auburn got a little bit bored with the way that they were playing. That was really dominant because it was so structured and slow. And now they're playing a bit of a looser style that has made for more excitement, but has also handed them some losses. So I do feel like in basketball, teams reinvent themselves a lot more than in football. And again, I'm not a football expert, so you guys, I maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but I do feel like over the course of a long basketball season, teams just reinvent themselves so much more. And for that reason, I do feel like it's a bit of a toss up when it comes to the second matchup, or you mentioned the perfect one where Kentucky was running Tennessee out of the gym in the regular season, and Tennessee is playing a completely different style now and was able to handle that game easily. So I almost treat this game with Auburn like it's a new matchup. Like, again, I hope Florida comes in with the confidence of like, hey, we blasted these guys when they were playing the best basketball of anything college basketball has seen in the last couple of years. So I hope Florida has that confidence. But from my standpoint, I'm kind of looking at it as like, this is kind of a different Florida team that's better. And this is just a different Auburn team. And I think it's going to have kind of a fresh look on Saturday.
Yeah, and Florida did not play with Elijah Martin and Micah Hanlockton during that game as well. So we will see. Eric, we've taken up a lot of your time this evening. We appreciate you joining us from beautiful Edmonton, Canada. Let everybody know where they can follow you, and we will hopefully talk to you next time as national champions.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I'll be keeping an eye on the Twitter account to see when you guys decide what you're gonna do on Monday if Florida's in the championship. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, for anyone who for anyone who can who wants to follow me, Eric Fawcett _ is on Twitter. GatorCountry.com is where you can find all my articles. As soon as I hang up, I'm going to go record the next episode of Florida Basketball Hour, our Florida basketball podcast. And we do have a Patreon as well, where I go through film studies lots and say, okay, this is, let's go look back at the film from when Florida beat Auburn and see what can happen. But as always, thanks guys. And I hope this isn't the last time we're speaking this season.
It won't be. Thanks so much, Eric. I appreciate you, and go support them. Go support their podcast. I tell everybody that I'm a basketball front runner, but I still listen to that one each and every week. So thanks so much, Eric. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Bye.